In this video, a handy tip about workbench functionality. So in Modo 12 with the workbench functionality, you can actually have the workbench functionality available to you in every custom form. What do I mean? Well, on one side you have your default workbench. So if I click this icon, I open my workbench, or alternatively, if I alt click on one of these buttons, I get a pop-up and I can tear it off. So that's my workbench. And up here you see you have your button for editing your workbench. Now that button can be made available to in every custom form you create. So for instance, if I have this form up here, I'm going to go to my form editor, find form, and click in that form. Now that form has been selected in my form editor, and when I go to the properties, all the way down you see you have a check mark for customizable workbench. So if I click this, now that adds a button, edit workbench, to that custom form. So if I click edit workbench and for instance click on that pick icon over here, now I can add tools, and by holding shift I can select multiple tools to that custom form. So click edit workbench to stop the editing, of course, and now those commands have been added to that custom form. Another handy functionality with the edit workbench functionality is that you can add popover forms with the help of the form editor. So if I click edit workbench and I'll check my pick to add and go to my form editor and click for instance on this form over here, which is called Action Center, and it is a popover form. Now uncheck edit workbench, you see that a button has been added to my access form over here, and when I click it I get my action centers just like that. Now it does work with popover forms, it does not seem to work with default forms. I haven't checked out other types of forms. So what do I mean? With my action center form selected over here, you see that the style is popover form. If it's default, it doesn't work with the pick to add. So if you want that functionality with workbench, then you have to set the style to popover form. So this is a handy way to quickly create several forms without having to edit everything in the form editor. You just create a new form. So for instance, create new form. I'm going to call it something like test, and it gets added. So customizable workbench, check it, and then preview form. Now when you create a form like that with customizable workbench enabled, you don't see a button, and it will appear after you add something. So if I for instance add a divider, so add divider, you see that now my edit workbench button becomes available. And of course I can do what I demonstrated before. So edit workbench, pick to add, and shift select several buttons or forms in the form editor. And when I'm done, I simply can click save workbench form, and I get of course my pop-up to save my config file just like that. And as a last tip, this also works in other layouts. So if I for instance go to my model layout over here, open my form editor, find form, click over here. Over here I have my basic. If I select customizable workbench, now you see that the button also has been added to my basic form. And just as before, edit workbench, click this icon to pick, and for instance if I select these over here, you see that those get added to that form, and so you have that functionality also available to you in other layouts. Hope you found it useful.